2024 Finance Committee meeting to order. Do we need to do a roll call because no one's on Zoom, or?
I need to do a roll call.
Nobody's
Okay,
here.
nobody's here. All right. So then, I guess we'll go to our first agenda item, which is Matt's budget.
I'll try to speak into a microphone so the note taker doesn't struggle too much. I think our ambition, the chairman and I, was to revisit a successful presentation from last year where we reviewed the financial condition of the town in PowerPoint and pointed out the highlights, and then moved into less detail about the budget. And the detailed budget didn't come out until March. This year, you guys want a budget up front. So what I prepared for you tonight, sound like I'm on Chopped. The dish I've made for you tonight is a preliminary budget that, pardon me, as a snapshot reflects the highest and best information available to me as of tonight. And I can explain my way through it. The format I've chosen to use is the budget format that is in the FinCom flyer that is sent to taxpayers. So you're familiar with this format. This format hasn't changed in many years, and the breakdown of the departments. And I don't have the PowerPoint ready yet just because I've been sick and I'm just trying to prioritize. So I wanted to get you started on a budget. I am going to go through a couple of pages from the Town of Douglas annual financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2023, which is a document I would encourage FinCom members to familiarize yourself with. I think it's 70 pages all told. It is basically the audit. And first and foremost, the highlight would be that this is a clean audit. It's funny the things that you live to hear people say, but these words are the ones we live to hear. In our opinion, the accompanying financial statements referred to above represent fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the Town of Douglas, Massachusetts. So it's a clean audit. And then as we go through quick highlights, one of the first slides in the presentation, and I will eventually give you that presentation fully updated and improved. But last year, you'll remember we had a quick conversation about the town's net position. So the total net value of all of its assets over all of its liabilities. And theoretically, we will never maximize that asset value because we're trying to spread out spending over the course of a decade on the most expensive capital assets, major trucks, roads, buildings. So you're never going to have 4 brand new schools, brand new town hall, brand new police and fire stations, everything brand new at the very highest asset value. That's not a thing. You don't do that. But at the same time, you don't want to be at sort of the bottom of the depreciation threshold for all your major assets, because what that really signals is that regardless of the financial condition of the town, you've neglected capital for so long that you haven't invested in anything new, and therefore the taxpayer can expect, well, maybe operational conservatism, but extensive capital budgeting over the course of several years through debt exclusions and other things. We've been trying to balance the asset growth of the town and giving our employees the best possible tools to do their job and to serve the public with modern equipment that is reliable, and to slowly address building issues and infrastructure issues in town. As of the close of the current fiscal year, the net position in governmental activities had a positive change of $2,706,443. So our net position continues to improve. So the overall value of all the assets owned by the taxpayers of the Town of Douglas has risen for another year in a row. The unassigned fund balance for the general fund is $5,959,285, a change of $1,374,644 in comparison to the prior year. So we continue to enhance the strength of the town's unassigned fund balance, which of course contributes to our long-term budget stability. Our unassigned fund balance as a percentage of our general fund expenditures now stands at 17.3%, which is a very desirable position for a community that is contemplating a proposal to issue general obligation debt to support a building project, in this case, a highway barn. So, a few years back, you were much closer to 5%. You've more than tripled your unrestricted fund balance. So that's, I can go on and on with the small details. I also want to point out that there is an interesting change in the town's OPEB liability, which this year was revised downward by about $1 million. You say, why is that happening? There's a couple of assumptions that have caught up with the actuaries. We have drastically reduced the cost of retiree health care by purchasing a different product and using market power to get a better price. And the truly extraordinary accomplishment of getting the retiree benefit providers to actually lock in their rates with rate caps. So really, for the last 5 years in our membership in Mass Strategic, we have not only cut the cost per member per month by about 30%, we've also locked in rate caps because of our ability to grow the group as rapidly as we have. We've been hitting our volume targets. So we've just basically reduced significantly the amount of money that we have to set aside for future needs by reducing the potential future cost. So the rest of the audit report gets into an awful lot of detail, and I won't cover it here. We'll probably hit the highlights in full when we have that state of the town, if you will, financial report. The only other thing I want to talk about in terms of general financial position is that these have been difficult times, and a number of communities have, over the past 5 years, struggled to maintain their financial health as they've encountered different headwinds because of revenue losses and other things. And while the ARPA program was very successful, once it started to peter out, a lot of our sister communities that have significant reliance upon things like hotel tax and food and beverage and other excise have had to watch that slowly recover, and maybe not exactly at the pace that they wanted it to. And they never made up all the losses they experienced during COVID and the period after COVID. Before getting into a summary of the budget, I'm going to distribute to you an update memo, which I will walk through fairly quickly. November special town meeting included a substantial amount of new growth that was allocated to the fiscal '24 budget, so the budget that we're in. Because as the budget developed during the year, the recognition was some accounts ran a little hot, and we had an initiative that we wanted to put in place in order to maintain service quality and service levels at our departments. Before doing the budget for this year, the exercise for me was to go back to fall special town meeting and determine how much of that spending that was approved by special town meeting would be recurring. So that would be added to the base of the budget for fiscal '25. And as you can see here on the first page of a 2-page document, almost all of the spending adjustments that were made on this front page were all permanent adds. And it's driven by operational realities, including, the cemetery. We realize how many more times it needs to be mowed every year, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all small expenses. When you turn the page, you're starting to look at the larger sums that will be held as permanent changes. One of them on police wages. At fall town meeting, we adjusted police wages by $34,000. That was a retro payment for our dispatchers as part of a contract that had been settled. So that is now built into their base and will be a permanent add. For fire wages and ambulance wages, this is the one to kind of keep your eye on, because there are a lot of moving parts in the fire and ambulance budget, because we have a lot of the same people, right, performing duties for both of those functions. And we more or less artificially assign them to one department or the other. The initiative at special town meeting in the fall was to add 70 hours a week of medic only, so someone who was not trained as a firefighter but who was trained as a paramedic, budget authority, so that the chief could go out and hire increasingly rare skill set, which is the paramedic skill set. We also had a non-recurring expense, a contract buyout for the former chief. So not all of this money will recur to the base. So between the two departments, it was $155,000. We're going to add just about $60,000 to the base. Okay, so the other 95 went to a buyout that's not going to recur. The other 60,000 was added to the base. After some discussion with the chief, fire expenses, so repairs, we added 22,000 in November. We're going to keep 15 of that in the budget. The rest of these are permanent. The one of probably the greatest interest, the Douglas Public Schools. We added $187,347 to the school's budget at fall town meeting. That is a permanent decision, so all of those expenses associated with that are deemed to be recurring, and the revenues are available to meet those recurring needs. Are there any questions about the net change here? The only other thing is community development. We had a staff member leave. We're replacing that function with a professional services firm, and we have to pay that as an expense because it's a service, not a personnel contract. So we're moving the money from compensation down into expenses, but it's the same amount. So it nets to zero. So all told, $331,810 of the $489,010 requested at special town meeting have been incorporated into the operational budget for fiscal '25.
Can you repeat that number?
So we're, at fall town meeting, we requested 489,010, and we will be holding over, or building into the base, 331,810 of that. Now, the way this draft budget is presented, the first column will be the budget that was approved by fiscal '24 annual town meeting. The money added in November of 2023 is in the second column. So the third column is the addition of any funds. So the base plus anything that was added and which will be carried over according to my memo that I just went through. So you have a fiscal '24 revised budget, which is after a special town meeting. And then the next column after that is the fiscal '25 town administrator preliminary budget proposal as of today's date. And the final column to the right will show you the difference between the revised '24 budget and the town administrator's proposed budget. Wait till it goes around.
may need you to say that again when I have it in my hand.
The columns are labeled.
Okay.
Out of curiosity, Matt, this $331,000 extra, I guess I can do the math here. I'm just thinking, like, what percentage increase was that into the budget? Was that like a 1% increase that just kind of got rolled over into the
Just
base?
about, yeah. So your budget's about 35 million?
Yeah, so it's about, kind of back of the envelope, about 1% extra. Okay.
So from, people like to hear the bottom line. The driver of the budget conversation this year is new growth, because we have valued the warehouse and established its taxable growth. And that number was $1.891 million. To which, for revenue estimating purposes, we added a 2.5% increase in the levy, plus another 200,000 in new growth, which we anticipate being a very easy target to hit, because that's residential development and other improvements to people's properties that get carried into new growth. So the task this year isn't so much to bring the budget into balance as it is to establish an allocation that reflects some of the sacrifices and challenges that we've encountered over the last 7 years since the override, trying to keep us afloat and turning back money at the end of the year without asking taxpayers for anything above and beyond the Prop 2.5%. The critical thing that we said at the beginning of that process, we being the select board and the town administrator, was that we would not add personnel. The only person we added over the course of those 7 years with a substantial salary is the economic development facilitator, whose impact was virtually impossible to deny at bringing in and administering many millions of dollars of federal and state grants that made the warehouse project possible. And the trick here has been to try to keep service levels at an acceptable level to the public without sacrificing our ability to fund capital and keep the town moving ahead without having deteriorating assets around us all the time.
Matt, one
Yeah.
question. What about the assistant fire chief? That wasn't an added position?
That was an ad, you're correct, that's a second ad. I guess the reason why it doesn't, I just, forgot it. But it's on the same vein, because in terms of grant activity and some other, and revenues that were brought in through ambulance, again, there was a financial rationale to hiring key people.
Okay.
And bringing that, but that's a good catch, you're correct. The assistant chief was an ad, and now I'm going to stop and think my way through every single last department to make sure I don't miss anybody else. But we had people come and go, and some of those retirements, we had people at the top end,
Right.
and were replaced by people at earlier steps, and so there was sort of a wash there. That was especially true in the police department, where we had several senior people retire.
Right. Board of Health, we only added hours.
Yeah, we've added hours
Right.
in any number of places. The building commissioner position was brought back to full-time.
Yep.
I'm trying to think, we've,
Nursing costs because of COVID.
the nursing costs went up due to COVID, and we had some staff people here who might have worked at 30 hours at one time that are now up to 33. But for the most part, yeah, I think assistant chief and the other position are, we also promoted Adam Furno's portfolio from sort of working foreman, building guy to truly be second in command at the highway department, and so he would slide into the superintendency at the appropriate time, which is where he is now. That was a salary change, but not necessarily a new head. this degree of budget flexibility, I want to set into motion the machinery to slowly address service level concerns on the municipal side of the budget, so that when the day comes, if you wake up one day and you're not a town of 9,000 anymore, you're a town of 11,000, you're not being asked to fund a brand-new position on every single shift of the fire department and every single shift of the police department. To add a new body to every rotation of the shifts is a cost-prohibitive thing, even if we were a town of 11,000 with a really strong financial position. It's just a lot of money to absorb all at once into the budget. So what is anticipated here is a slow growth pattern that addresses immediate needs, but is sustainable over the time horizon of the budget forecast, which is 5 to 7 years. So instead of adding 4 police officers, the recommendation is to add 1. And that 1 police officer would be a school resource officer who would greatly enhance our ability to serve 2 campuses and, maintain the level of security and that feeling of hometown security that you get when you roll up to a school building with your kids and there's a uniformed police officer there. It also, in the summer, gives us another officer on the road, and it just increases our day staff. So most of our major responses we anticipate are often during the day. And so when the chief and the lieutenant and 2 SROs and the duty crew would be on staff during the day, we have a pretty, by Douglas standards, a decent response force that you don't have it in the middle of the night with 1 cruiser on the road or 2. You were going to...
So when you're talking like your population increasing from 9 to 11, would there also be, say, taxable, like new growth, new homes that also would be contributing to the budget? So if you're adding positions now while we're at 9,000, we haven't also added in the tax base to pay for that, really.
Well, we have, because we have the extraordinary event of
Right.
a major capital asset
Right.
in town that's only partially valued at this point, right? So it's over $100 million worth of value. And that's the extraordinary event. So the budget of the town should always be constrained by how much new growth it generates every year from organic change in the residential tax base, because it is a residential town.
Right.
When you have an extraordinary event, like a 1 million square foot warehouse, that's going to be in the base forever, that's when you have the opportunity to look a little bit ahead and say, let's get a leg up on what it is,
Yeah.
and not count on somebody's deck or farmer's porch
Right.
being the source of funding for major positions. So, a police officer, I'm going to recommend that we sustain the 70 hours a week commitment to the medic-only program. Recommending adding a regular rank-and-file individual to the highway department, because that was cut from John Furno's highway department many years ago and was never restored. So we would like to get back to 6. And the remainder is actually union settlements. So we have already settled tentative agreements with both the police and fire unions. And I went into this negotiation round with them with the specific goal of making them competitive versus other communities, versus the private sector, because we are having a devil of a time finding anyone to apply for any of these positions that's even remotely qualified. And then when we do their background checks for those that might be, they're coming to us with a lot of baggage, and often the risk is not worth the potential reward. And it's a very difficult position to be in, and I am making a judgment as a hiring manager in this environment that the staff I have is worth their weight in gold. And I anticipate significant changes in the dynamic of the ambulance industry. I think we're going to see a lot of pressure from Washington and from CMS Medicaid, Medicare, to really limit what ambulance services can charge for the per-run cost. And there is an entire industry built around those revenues. That's the private ambulance industry that many of the local communities around us rely upon. And if I had to write my exam book right now, 5 years from now, I don't think that industry is going to be there. I don't think the hospitals are going to be able to step up and replace it, because God knows hospitals are financial disasters. So the idea that they can run a fleet of ambulances and not screw it up, it's absurd. So it's going to fall back upon municipalities to continue to provide frontline advanced life supports for its citizens. And we can't afford to bleed it out the door and lose it. So we've made significant changes in the pay structure for both police officers and recalibrated the table in fire and ambulance so that the base wage is now the medic wage, not a firefighter wage. So in the past, I'm a firefighter, I have a medic, I get a stipend or a bonus or another, a different grade because I have my medic. Now we're hiring medics. God bless you if you're a firefighter, there's a premium associated with being a firefighter, but what we're really after is being able to provide that medical service to people. And that's, again, a judgment, because I believe it will continue to be a little bit less challenging to recruit and an ongoing privilege to work with our call firefighters that really step up in this town. And we're relying to no small extent on that extended force of call firefighters to back us up and to respond to calls. But that's a safer gamble than saying we can let medics walk out the door and not compete for them and just have a full-time fire department with everybody's a basic and nobody's able to provide the service. So that's going to explain a good deal of the spending change. So I'm going to flip to I'm going to go through it in detail in a second, but I just want to get you to, on page 5, the change from fiscal '24 is $1.4 million. Now, you said, Matt, that you were working off almost $2 million of new revenue. The assessor has recommended that we hold back $550,000 in overlay in order to sustain any tax abatement filings by the warehouse owner. It is an extremely conservative position, but given the volume, given the size of the account, we want to make sure we over budget here because we don't want to have any difficulties. I don't think there's any chance of us even having to part with even a tiny amount of that overlay. But at the appropriate time during this fiscal year, once all of the appeal deadlines have passed, that overlay could be closed to free cash, which is what the assessor is likely to recommend. So when I balance the budget this year, I'm balancing to a number that's going to be in the black, about $330,000, with the anticipation that of the $550,000 overlay, let's say we're going to take 500 of that back. What is that? That's a lot of money, right? So that's almost $830,000. What I'm going to recommend to the town is that that money be held back for the purchase of real estate associated with the Highway Barn project. So that it will be a cash purchase, and we wouldn't roll that into the bond or do anything like that, okay? So that is the goal. So I'm budgeting to a surplus of that $1.4 million. How is it allocated? If you turn quickly to the Douglas Public Schools, I'm recommending a 4% increase over the revised budget. So that is an additional $590,000 to the Douglas Public Schools. There are negotiation sessions that are being set up with a number of unions. There are some of the same issues in recruiting and retention of public school educators that we have in public safety. Getting people to do the job, getting people to stay with the job, and being constant. It is also a reflection of the fact that The Douglas Public Schools, if you look back at their year-over-year percentage increase, it was somewhere between 1.5 and 2% for the last several years running. That was a necessary component of being able to live within the means created by the override. It simply was. That was an initial substantial infusion of cash into the Douglas Public Schools the first year of the override, and then after that, it was very small incremental amounts. So we're going to try to catch up a little bit here with 4%, but it's substantially more than 4%. If you factor in the fact that we've already put 187 of recurring in, so. The other interesting fact here is that the school bus transportation contract, we have what we feel is a robust number that will be replicated in the superintendent's budget, so I'm putting it in mind. In an ideal world, and this is where Finance Committee's pencils get sharpened, right? What I've always told the superintendent and business manager is if they can save money with their vendor contracts, they can keep it. Now, that's a policy decision that I don't have the authority to necessarily enact on my own. It requires you as a Finance Committee to finalize a budget. But right now, I'm just scoring it as a nice savings year over year, but I'm not entirely opposed to seeing people say, we want to reach into that if we had to. So that's 590. I've budgeted a substantial increase in the assessment for BVT of 9.6%. I'm hoping it doesn't come in that high, because I will walk upside down and backwards and recite the Cyrillic alphabet ad nauseum if he manages to blow past that. One of the things that's interesting is that this is driven by population of students in the school. So you don't really know exactly where he's going to end up until his seniors have left and he has a good matriculation number for this year. So you don't know what the net total is. We were already at a very high number. So depending how many seniors graduate and how many freshmen he intends to take, we may or may not alter that number by much. He seems to know, though, and sort of intimated that 9.6% wasn't a bad place to start, so that's where I'm going to start. He has a funny way of being right about his predictions.
But can't provide a budget.
Can't provide a budget, but he knows exactly how many. Anyway, let's not go there.
Yep.
The next largest increase in the budget will be in the police department. It is a combination of three things. One, adding a school resource officer. Two, compensation chart changes that affect all union members in the police union. And three, the purchase of cruisers. So that it's almost exactly $320,000 increase to that one department is driven by multiple factors, all coming in the same year. And as you know, we do not buy cruisers every single year, but we expense them because we don't treat them as a capital outlay. They just don't last long enough to be there.
So Matt, going back to the addition of a police officer, I'm all for when we feel like we need to add staff. The distance between the campuses, is that like 20 miles? What's the distance between the campuses of the school?
It might as well be 20 miles.
Okay.
Right, so they're right next to each other.
Oh, okay.
But you can't get there from here, they'd say in Maine, at least if you're in a vehicle. You have to go down one driveway, up Davis Street, and up the other driveway. And we've been working on a solution to this, and we do have to navigate the school committee's desires here on just how much of their property they want to sully with roadways. But the two campuses are not presently linked by a roadway, so you have to go around. Walking through this week with the security camera project that we have out to bid for the schools, you just realize the enormity of the task of seeing after these three buildings with all the nooks and crannies and ways around. It has been a long-standing recommendation of the chief of police in Douglas to add an SRO.
To add, okay.
Ideally, he would add more, but at least one.
At
Yeah.
Okay, just when we go to the town, I want to have a really firm reason why we would like to add this. So that,
Yeah.
I've noticed at town meetings that people really want a good firm reason, and the reason of adding one is better now than adding 4 down the road. I get where you're going, but a good financial backing would be,
And it's not only financial, though, so
Right.
there's, without getting into unnecessary level of detail, the town as a whole is investing significantly into the security of our school campuses. We have improved the access road to rear access to the high school, so it's no longer one way in, one way out. It's 2 ways in, 2 ways out. And we did that almost entirely at the town's own expense, so our own highway department was able to improve the access point. We're allocating what I think is going to end up being close to $250,000 in ARPA funds for improved closed circuit security cameras. And we're working with the school administration to talk about another aspect of that, which is enunciation. So doors that are open and closed, they enunciate, say, rear door open, and technology makes it possible for that notification to pull that camera up on the screen. So you know somebody's opened the rear door, and now you can visualize on the screen what's going on. And lastly, we're investing a lot in training. So tomorrow we have a 3-hour tabletop exercise with MEMA over school security. So we're just responding to society and society's trends. We all know that you cannot live in fear and manage every single aspect of your day to the worst case scenario. That's not what, it's just never going to pan out, right? But there is a level of training and recognition of danger and other things that is extremely responsible and really necessary in today's modern environment. We just got to get to that point where we feel like we've achieved it. So the extra SRO is 2 more boots on the ground, another radio in a hand, another set of eyes. It's a significant enhancement to,
agreed,
especially the drop-off pickup time.
right,
Yeah.
agreed.
The 2 other departments that are going to show you the largest increase, one is, again, it's kind of, I don't want to say hidden because I'm not trying to hide anything. It's just that the way the numbers have gone up and down, don't lose track of the bottom line does increase substantially from fiscal '24 to fiscal '25 at fire and ambulance, because the impact of making their wages more competitive was fairly significant, is in the $30,000 range. And then we are adding 70 hours a week of that paramedic level. So we anticipate that we might be hiring experienced people who wouldn't be at step 1, they'd be at step 5. So we're budgeting ahead of that so that we don't have to come back to town meeting this year in the fall to supplement that wage. So there's a substantial increase there. It's just not obvious because we have already asked for those funds in the fall and got them, right? So we're just asking for them to restore it. The other is the library. So this budget calls for an increase in the library of a little over $100,000, which is a substantial injection of resources into this asset. I've been impressed with the library director's ability to gather and manage statistics on how many people are using our library and its collection. It's a very large number of people, a large number of transactions compared to the tiny size of the building. And so they're doing a really killer job. They're really just amazing. And they're wonderful people. And what the $100,000 allows us to do is actually just mostly increase the hours. So instead of opening at 11 every day, we open at 9 in the morning, stay open until 8 o'clock at night. And it takes a little bit of staffing to do that. We're also going to put a fairly substantial investment into their collection, especially their electronic books. So by paying for an appropriate set of subscriptions, we can greatly enhance people's access to electronic books. It's a very popular item to borrow. So I think, this library, again, like the schools, languished with very small year-over-year increases and did their part to keep the service open when the budget was most difficult in the community. And we just see the level of usership going up and up and up. During COVID, the library staff was outstanding, driving around town, dropping off books, picking up books, dropping off games, dropping off all kinds of stuff, and really enhanced the quality of life for our town. So the value of the service and the engagement of this institution in the life of the community is significant and was worth the investment, a long overdue investment, in my opinion. So that's my 30,000-foot altitude over the top. If you look at most of these other departments, you're looking at 4 digits. All of general government is up $49,339, which is just about 2.5%.
Do you have any potential parcels of land for the highway farm?
Not to be too heavy-handed, but I think we cast a broad net at first and had a whole bunch of parcels reviewed by our house doctor, Weston and Sampson, architectural engineering firm. And after a lot of consideration of the different sites and challenges, we really only have one. And, it's been listed for sale because there's a game, and nobody takes it personally. It's just what you do. But at the end of the day, I've been authorized by the Select Board to get an appraisal, which is what I'll be doing.
Can you tell us where it is? Or?
It's very close to where we are now. It's just a much bigger parcel.
Are we going to have to take it by eminent domain, or do you
I hope not.
be able to?
I hope not. I hope we can work a friendly transaction here.
That's always the better way.
It's always the better way, and that is our intention from the outset.
Okay.
We don't mess around when we hire an appraiser. We go straight to the top of the profession, which is a certification called an MIA, and we've been using O'Hara and Buthray for all of our appraisals, and I'm very happy with the results. It's almost impossible
I
to
think I've
beat
used
their
them
numbers.
myself.
Yeah. They're out of Worcester.
And what about the warehouse? Anybody moving in there? I mean, like,
So whether there's a tenant or not, the value of the shell is what is here.
yeah.
There's a whole chunk of value that's not here yet. And it is the tricky part. Very, very tricky part of managing a municipality with an asset like a warehouse like this is that a fair amount of investment will be made inside the building into robotics and all kinds of other tangible, taxable items. You have to be very, very careful as a municipality not to get excited about that first year that your tangible tax or personal property tax is what it's called, materializes. Right? Because those assets, unlike the building, will depreciate, and they may be on a very rapid depreciation cycle. It wouldn't be unusual for some of those things to depreciate over 5 years to a book value of 0 or not much better than 0. So you can't get all excited and spend all that money in the first year because your revenue source that funded that is, so there's a recommendation to be made, maybe not this fiscal year, but next fiscal year, when we go through this process again, is to how to look at those funds and manage them to the best opportunity of the town without using them as an operational crutch because they're unreliable and unpredictable. It is profound, the expense. So the Tri-Town Blackstone Valley Logistics Building, that's on the other side of Lackadam Road, it's not a mystery anymore. The client that is going to occupy that space is McKesson. They are going to move from Northborough to this location here. They may spend twice as much on robots as they're spending on the building. There may be over $200 million worth of robots in that building, which will be taxed by the 3 towns. Douglas only gets a little bit, but a little bit of a lot is still a lot. It's still a decent amount of money. But I just think that's, as citizens, right, we see this, all economic development, we need economic growth, and then either the state government or the federal government will come in and say, but we're going to exempt everything in the building. So you get a manufacturer comes in with equipment, right, and you're all excited about it because it's jobs, and it's usually good jobs, and maybe the vehicles will be taxable on excise. But a lot of the equipment inside, if it's used to transform something else, it's not taxable. It can benefit from investment tax credit and other things. It's not true with warehouses. They're not transforming anything. They're just storing it and selling it. So it's all taxable.
To your point, those assets can depreciate very quickly if they're taking bonus depreciation or if they've got a 5 or 7 year useful life.
Yep.
And then it's next to nothing, so you don't want to build that into your operations and then have to deal with that fiscal cliff in 5 years of, oh, the bottom just dropped out of the revenue.
And I think we have nearby communities that are realizing that now. And it's a hard lesson to learn. The other weird thing about this is if you think about what this does to our levy capacity, the levy capacity won't shrink when those assets depreciate. The levy capacity is going to stay there. So then they invest again in 5 years, right, because everything is run its useful life and levy capacity keeps going up and up and up. So this is a completely different dynamic for the town of Douglas than has existed to this point in your history. Once you have an industrial commercial property, these are the concerns you have.
What do you mean by levy capacity? I'm not sure what that means.
You can tax all of that personal
Okay.
property, right? So that becomes your ability to tax will be
Right,
set by that
right,
level.
right, okay.
But if the underlying assets are depreciating,
Right.
if you're going to continue to raise that same amount, you'd have to
Right.
raise it from other sources.
Oh, okay. So basically, don't spend it.
No, that's exactly it. Don't
Okay.
spend it.
You know, one of
If
the-
you do, spend it on one-time things like capital
Right.
that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the taxpayer can see the value, not for nothing. The advance copy of my newspaper would say spend it on roads.
The one thing, though, that kind of frightens me a little bit looking down the line is that it appears they're building these warehouses everywhere, throughout the entire country. So everybody's on this same bandwagon, they're building these warehouses. If you end up in a situation where they're so overbuilt that
Empty?
they're empty, their value isn't, if value is what you can rent them for. If you end up having to sell your assets out, like when the Japanese came in, they bought Rockefeller Center and everything else, then ended up having to sell it at 10 cents on the dollar after. If your value goes down, what's our chances of getting the kind of tax revenue we think we're going to get?
I would pose the technical question to the assessor. I'll give you my best answer from my perspective, is that there is a significant difference between a 300,000 square foot warehouse and a 1 million square foot warehouse. And a 1 million square foot warehouse is a regional asset. It doesn't have any peers other than buildings its own size within its own range. So the people, the private equity that puts up the funds to support these have made the judgment, and they stand the most to lose if they don't get the return that they expected.
Right.
The COVID pandemic led the industry to make critical assumptions about the acceleration of e-commerce as being the principal way most of us will buy goods. And there was a huge shortage of warehouse space in their minds. The more sophisticated discussion that has evolved since then is that there are different levels of storage, right? So you've got that quick handle, so I mean, your food items would maybe perishable, and you just do it turning, and that's one play in the warehouse market. Another is white goods, right? So I'm just gonna have a warehouse full of refrigerators. And they may not move very fast at all. When they do, it's usually a really big truck, because it's being distributed to smaller stores or delivered to people's homes. The key for us is gonna be to recognize where we fit in the supply chain and where any tenant fits and whether how stable that's going to be. A company like McKesson, which is a Fortune 5 company, they've made a significant decision to close one facility and open this one, so it's a really, it seems to have legs. It's really a significant play. I'd be more skeptical of any big box retailer, anybody who still has a lot invested in point of sale in major retail centers and the warehouses that support them. Because if Lowe's closes tomorrow, what are we going to do with all the Lowe's warehouses? So, we're hoping against hope that CRG, which is marketing this asset to potential partners, is finding somebody whose business model is going to be sustainable for the duration.
Bet you're not hoping as much as they are.
They are hoping a lot. They have an awful lot of money tied up in that building.
Right. Because I've read a lot of stuff that the next problem is going to be commercial lending and commercial real estate is going to, if there's a problem, it's not going to be residential.
I would rather own a large warehouse right now than a small one, though,
Yeah.
if I'm looking at those things. And at the end of the day, I'm making light of it to be funny on purpose.
Yeah, yeah.
But can you imagine what a 1 million square foot of cannabis would smell like?
Of course, everybody thought they were going to get rich on cannabis, and now Uxbridge is going to give them back $1 million.
Because they screwed up.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
No, it doesn't surprise me at
I
all
didn't think
either.
they were going to get away with that right from the start.
You can only be so aggressive, and, that's what nice thing about growing up on a farm, right, is you can only milk the cow so much.
Right.
And at some point, you're starting to hurt the thing, right, so.
Does anybody comments, Howard?
Nope.
I hope this is a good starting point for you guys. So what do we do from here logistically? I'm loath to change anything in the budget without writing it down, because you're going to wonder why the numbers change from one meeting to the next. So I'll do my best to be very careful about recording those, some cases corrections, in some cases last-minute additions. So what you'll be getting at the beginning of every Finance Committee meeting is your update. This is what I changed because I thought I had to.
Has this been posted on that SharePoint? No.
Not yet.
Okay. And I had questions about how to get to the SharePoint again, so I believe he's here tomorrow. Gene and I chatted about this, so I'm going to call in and get specific instructions once again, because my computer's dead. And I lost my link, so.
I couldn't even get my phone to work the other day, so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so there will be a SharePoint, and the version control becomes really difficult. And so in the background, forever and always, I will have the version that I work on, just in case somebody accidentally uploads a whole bunch of changes and then forgets where they did them. Right, so I just want to say, if you want to do scratch math or whatnot, create a new worksheet tab and just play around with it that way with cell references, and don't get into the machinery of the budget itself. It could really mess things up.
Have your department heads seen these numbers yet, or is this?
So this is a little bit unusual for me. Every year it seems like we do it differently. This year, I spoke to every department head. For a prolonged period, no, right? I clearly put a lot more time with fire and police, because a lot of it's driven by their contract negotiations, so a lot of energy went into that. There's a built-in engine in this model around expenses. So each expense category has a decision rule. So if you navigated through those sheets last year, you saw in the far right-hand side of every expense spreadsheet, it would say hold or increase year over year at 1.5%. So there was those items that I know prices go up every single year, software licenses, all that stuff, right? There's a built-in cost increase every year. So the department head isn't trying to figure out what that is. They're just checking that against what the vendor's telling them, and if it's in the same ballpark, the higher number goes in the budget.
How are we with the storms?
So I don't know for this weekend, and this weekend's going to be dispositive because it was multiple hours of effort and multiple rounds. Salt prices were reasonable this year, but we're still at somewhere between $7,500 and $9,000 every time the department does a full salt of all of our roads. So if they go out 3 times, it's 27 grand.
They might have had to go out today.
I would think so. Today's one of the more dangerous situations that
Yeah.
we've had.
Black ice, and yeah. They had a big, major accident up on 146.
I was in it. I saw, nothing happened. I saw
Yeah,
4 or 5 different
Yeah.
spots where there were tow trucks and
Yeah.
cruisers and people off the road and
Yes.
car parts and everything else.
Back to this, I have one other question, capital. Is there a number for that, or?
So if you look at the annual town meeting capital improvement plan, year 2, that number is pretty much the budget that the capital committee has to spend. I might be able to push them somewhere between another $100,000 and $200,000. Because there are a couple of smaller projects that are kind of nagging, and that I don't want them to skip over because they already have an improvement plan. Going back to the challenges of managing in the current marketplace, this is insane. We can't buy a bloomin' truck to save our lives.
it's great.
Nobody's gonna. And they're 2 years out, they cost an arm and a leg, and I don't know what it is. I've studied the world economy for all my academic career and all the rest of it, and I just don't get it. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's chips, if it's who's doing what out there, but we are,
In the $1 million square foot warehouse.
I guess so, right? Because I have this bad feeling, almost like they ran up production during the worldwide pandemic, and certain critical items were never produced, and that somewhere out in the Midwest, there are these vast lots full of Ford 150s that don't have the right chip, and they're just sitting there, and there's nothing we can do to get them because they won't operate. I don't know what to think, but look, this is the problem. I can remember, just-in-time inventory. Remember when that was going to be the solution to all of the world's problems, because the Japanese were doing it and they were brilliant, and we're all just going to do just-in-time. Well, that's wonderful until you have trucks, and every single truck is now a custom product, almost like a fire engine. And then all of a sudden, demand dries up. Well, and your workforce scatters to the winds, and you don't have a base product to sell anymore because you're only building what has been ordered. It's a horror show. We had the same issue with all crazy things, water pipe,
Yeah,
2 years ago. We couldn't get your hands on water pipe to save your life. It's eased up somewhat, but why was it even so difficult? It didn't make any sense at all. So I don't know what to think, but our capital budget, to the extent that it would change because we have to become strategic about ordering items in this market environment. So if my ambulance is 7 years old, and I don't want it to be 10 years old when I take it off the road, and it's going to take me almost 2.5 years to get one, I need to order it now, even though I don't want to. It used to be we could almost drive to a certain people's lot and buy it off the lot, and now we can't.
Anything, Howard?
Not at the moment. No.
Nobody has any additional comments? Well, thank you, Matt, for the,
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, guys.
yeah, thank you very much.
Do you need me for anything else, or am I excused?
Yeah, no, I think we're good.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, Matt.
Stay healthy. Don't get behind.
Don't give it over here.
Bring it home.
Did anybody have any items that were not on the agenda that they'd like to? No? If that's the case, I'll entertain a motion.
Just scheduling, right?
Yes.
Just schedule,
I just want to remind you, there's no meeting the 13th,
right?
and both schools have confirmed for February 27th.
Okay.
So is that going to be our next meeting?
I received an email, which I passed along to the Douglas Public Schools for your request. If you have anything you'd like from Dr. Fitzpatrick, if you could just send me that in advance, and then I'll make sure he has it.
Through the chair or now or, In an
The
email.
chair is fine.
Okay.
You know, because if anybody else has anything, I'll combine them.
okay. I consistently like actually from both schools, their placement records last 5 years.
Carol, did you ask for some numbers?
I did, I get them on the ambulance.
Was it on the
I
ambulance or
sent that.
school?
You sent it to me.
I had read through the minutes and incorporated, I had sent Gene an email for some information requested from the school, and I took the liberty of what you had requested in the previous minutes
Right.
back in December and included that in my request list.
Okay, oh, the number.
Yeah, the number of the school
students.
choice and-
Yeah, school
yeah.
choice, right, oh, good, good,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to really know that,
Yeah.
yeah.
So did you get those numbers?
Not yet, Gene was saying she passed that.
I sent the request. I asked
sent
that they
She
bring
sent
it.
it to the school.
Okay, so they'll bring that with them when they come?
Yeah, I did request that I have it a little bit in advance so I could send it out to the finance committee, so you'd have a chance to review it.
Does the school department know how much we pay for each student that goes somewhere else, or is that only something that you know?
I'm sorry?
You know, if, say a Douglas kid wants to go to Uxbridge, does it come out of their budget?
So just a reminder,
Yeah.
school choice in
Yeah,
goes into a special revenue account or grant.
right,
School choice out, an assessment,
yes.
gets paid from the general fund, so it comes off the top.
It gets paid from the Douglas,
Yeah, they do not net together.
no, I know that, but
Yeah.
it gets paid from the Douglas School Department.
So it
budget.
reduces the cherry.
General fund.
Reduces-
General fund.
Comes out of
General fund.
fund.
It comes out of general
Yeah.
fund.
Yeah.
It's an assessment, yes, it's a bill to us.
Okay, so it's not in their budget then?
No.
No.
Wow. Hmm,
No, so you'll have your state revenue.
right,
So, you know, our revenue source is property taxes,
right.
local receipts, state revenue. It reduces the state revenue available to support the general fund.
Okay, so, so then when they say that, you know, they get upset that they have to use some of the school choice fund to fund the school department, the money coming in, that doesn't seem too fair.
Well, the thing you got to be careful of,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
You always, it's a tightrope, right? We talked about this
Right.
maybe 7, 8 years ago.
Right.
Or before the override.
Yeah.
If you don't fund the Douglas Public Schools or the schools at a certain level, the indicators that you watch are
Right.
school choice out, BBT, and Norfolk Aggie. Because if they're not staying here, they're going someplace else. And
Right.
there's a cost to that.
Right,
The money's not staying at the local system, you're paying it someplace else. Sorry.
Where does the school choice in money go to?
It goes into a grant. It's a special revenue fund, and it goes to the grant.
Ultimately flowing to the general fund?
To the
No,
schools.
it's to support the schools.
That
So they
goes-
get the school choice in, we pay
Got
for the
it,
school
got it.
choice out.
Okay,
If
yeah.
you want to think of it
Yeah,
that
yeah.
way.
but what they were saying when they were
Thank you.
here,
Yeah.
it almost, and I, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded to me like they were saying that they thought school choice money in was almost like their little piggy bank that they could use, which I'm sure they're not, they're using it for, things that they need. But it was almost like they were very upset if we thought they should use some of it to fund their operating budget. That's what I heard, but I don't know if somebody else heard it different.
Well, I don't want to say anything in the school. There is always, we had this conversation last
Yeah.
week, there is also some level of school choice, all their special revenues being used towards their operation in the
Right,
fiscal
right,
year.
right.
So in the school department, you appropriate the general fund, you appropriate that general fund
Right.
expenditure. But they are also using, during the course of the year, preschool, school lunch, circuit breaker, school choice, all of their grants.
Yeah.
So the cost of their school department is not what we just appropriate, it's all these other funds
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
Takes me 10 years, but I get it.
That's that?
I said it takes me 10 years, but I get it.
Yeah.
Getting there,
We're all a work in progress.
right?
We are.
Any motions?
Any motions?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Mike makes a motion to adjourn. Heather seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you all.